Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The garage door creaked open as I pulled in after another long day at the shop. Shutting off the engine, I sat for a moment, enjoying the quiet. The house lights were on, warm and inviting. Home sweet home. As I stepped inside, the smell of lasagna hit me. My stomach growled. Dad's home. Lily's voice rang out. She came barreling down the hallway, pigtails flying. I scooped her up, twirling her around. There's my ballet star. How was practice? She giggled. I gotta be in the front row today. That's my girl. I set her down, ruffling her hair. Where's your brother? Video games, Lily said, rolling her eyes. As usual. I chuckled. Well, let's see if we can pry him away for dinner. Lorraine appeared in the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Welcome home, honey. She gave me a quick peck on the cheek. Dinner's almost ready. Smells amazing, I said, wrapping an arm around her waist. What would I do without you? She laughed. Starve, probably. How was work? Same old, same old. Oil changes, tire rotations, one transmission rebuild. I loosened my tie. Nothing Max and I couldn't handle. Jake's voice carried from the living room. Dad, you're home. Come see. I'm about to beat my high score. I shared a look with Lorraine. She shooed me away. Go on. I'll call you when dinner's ready. I found Jake sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, eyes glued to the screen. Hey, champ. How was school? Fine, he mumbled, thumbs flying. Coach says I might start as pitcher this weekend. I grinned, settling in beside him. That's great news. We should practice your curveball tomorrow. Jake's character on screen executed a complicated move. Yes, new high score. He turned to me, grinning. Did you see that, Dad? Sure did. Nice work. I ruffled his hair. Now how about you wash up for dinner? He groaned. 5 more minutes? Nope. Your mom's been slaving over a hot stove. Let's not keep her waiting. Grudgingly, Jake set down the controller. As we headed to the kitchen, Lily came bounding up. Daddy, can we have ice cream for dessert? Please. I glanced at Lorraine, who was setting the table. She gave a slight nod. Well, I said, pretending to consider it carefully. I suppose if you eat all your vegetables. Lily's face lit up. I will. I promise. We gathered around the table, passing dishes and sharing stories from our day. Jake proudly recounted his baseball practice, while Lily chattered about her upcoming recital. So, Lorraine, I said between bites, how are things at the hospital? She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. Oh, you know, busy as always. We've got a new patient in the oncology ward, poor thing, but I think we're making progress. I nodded, reaching for her hand across the table. They're lucky to have you. She smiled, but it seemed a little strained. Before I could ask if everything was all right, Jake piped up. Mom, can I go to Tommy's house after school tomorrow? His dad got him the new Super Smash game. Lorraine's smile returned, more genuine this time. As long as your homework's done first. After dinner, I helped Lorraine clean up while the kids settled in for a movie. You seem tired, I said, drying a plate. Everything okay at work? She sighed. Just a lot going on. New protocols, staff shortages. You know how it is. I set down the dish rag and pulled her close. Hey, I appreciate everything you do. For the family, for your patients. You're amazing. Lorraine leaned into me, closing her eyes. Thanks, Evan. I don't know what I'd do without you. Later, as we tucked the kids into bed, I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. This was what I'd always wanted: a loving family, a stable job, a home filled with laughter. Sure, we weren't rich, but we had each other. What more could a man ask for? Lorraine and I settled onto the couch, her head on my shoulder as we watched the late news. Oh, she said suddenly, I almost forgot. I've got a seminar this weekend. New treatment techniques. It's out of town, so I'll be gone overnight Saturday. I frowned slightly. Another one? Didn't you just go to one last month? She sat up, not quite meeting my eyes. I know, I'm sorry, but you know how important continuing education is in my field. I nodded slowly. No, you're right. It's just, I'll miss you. Lorraine's expression softened. She leaned in, kissing me deeply. I'll miss you too, but I'll make it up to you when I get back, I promise. As we headed to bed, I pushed aside the nagging feeling in my gut. Lorraine was dedicated to her job, that's all. I was lucky to have such a hard-working, caring wife. And tomorrow was another day: Jake's baseball practice, Lily's recital, our life together. I drifted off to sleep, Lorraine's warm presence beside me, looking forward to the weekend ahead with my family. Saturday morning dawned bright and early. I yawned, stretching as I made my way to the kitchen. To my surprise, Max was already there, nursing a cup of coffee. "Morning, boss," he said with a grin. "Lorraine let me in. Hope you don't mind." I chuckled, pouring myself a cup. "Mi casa es su casa. What brings you by so early?" Max's expression turned serious. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something." Before he could continue, Lorraine bustled in, overnight bag in hand. "Morning, boys. I'm heading out. Evan, don't forget Lily has ballet at 2, and Jake needs new cleats." I gave her a quick kiss. "Got it covered. Drive safe, honey." As the door closed behind her, I turned back to Max. "So, what's on your mind?" He shifted uncomfortably. "It's about Lorraine." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What about her?" Max took a deep breath. "Look, you know I wouldn't say anything if I wasn't worried. But, have you noticed anything off lately?" I frowned. "Off how?" "She's been on her phone a lot. And these seminars and late shifts, they seem to be happening more often." I laughed, but it sounded forced even to my ears. "Come on, Max, Lorraine's a nurse. Of course she's busy." Max held up his hands. I know. It's just, the other day at the barbecue, I overheard her on the phone. She was being real secretive, man." I felt my jaw clench. "What are you saying?" "I'm not saying anything," Max backpedaled. "Just keep your eyes open, okay?" I stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "Lorraine would never cheat on me. We're happy. We have a good life." Max's eyes were full of concern. "I hope you're right, buddy. I really do." After he left, I tried to shake off the conversation, but Max's words kept echoing in my head. I busied myself with chores, trying to push away the doubts. That afternoon, I took Jake to the sporting goods store for new cleats. "How about these, Dad?" Jake held up a pair of flashy neon shoes. I chuckled. "A bit bright, don't you think? How about we stick with classic black?" Jake rolled his eyes. "Boring." As we browsed, my phone buzzed. A text from Lorraine. "Miss you already. Can't wait to get home tomorrow." I smiled, feeling my earlier worries fade. See? Everything was fine. After dropping Jake at a friend's house, I picked up Lily from ballet. Her face was flushed with excitement as she climbed into the car. "Daddy, Miss Johnson says I might get a solo in the recital." "That's fantastic, sweetheart." I grinned at her in the rearview mirror. "We'll have to celebrate. How about ice cream?" Lily cheered, and soon we were sitting at the local ice cream parlor, Lily chattering away between bites of her sundae. And then Kaylee said that Tommy likes me, but I told her that's gross because boys have cooties. I laughed. "Oh, really? Do I have cooties too?" Lily considered this seriously. "No, you're different. You're daddy." As we finished our treats, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Lorraine. "Seminar running late. Might not be back until Monday. So sorry." I frowned, a familiar unease settling in my stomach. "What's wrong, Daddy?" Lily asked, chocolate smeared around her mouth. I forced a smile. "Nothing, sweetie. Just a message from Mom. She might be gone an extra day." Lily's face fell. "But she promised to help me practice my routine tomorrow." "I know, honey, but you know how important Mom's job is. Tell you what, I'll help you practice instead." Lily brightened. "Really? You'll wear a tutu and everything?" I laughed, pushing aside my concerns. "Let's not get carried away, but I'll do my best." That night, after putting the kids to bed, I found myself restless. Max's words kept replaying in my mind. I picked up Lorraine's tablet, intending to watch a movie to distract myself. As I unlocked the screen, a message notification popped up. Without thinking, I tapped it. My heart stopped. "Can't wait to see you again. Same place." The sender was listed only as G. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. It could be innocent, a coworker, a patient's family member. But deep down, I knew. My hands shaking, I set the tablet down. What was I going to do? Confront her? Wait and see? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I needed proof. One way or another, I had to know the truth. Monday morning, I called the shop. Max? Yeah, I'm not feeling great. Think you can handle things today? Max's voice was concerned. Sure, boss. Everything okay? I swallowed hard. I hope so. I'll let you know. I waited until the kids were off to school, then got in my car. My heart pounded as I dialed Lorraine's number. Hey, honey. Her voice was cheery. I'm just wrapping up here. Should be home in a few hours. I took a deep breath. Actually, I was thinking of surprising you. Where exactly is this seminar? There was a pause. Too long. Oh, it's at the Marriott downtown. But you don't have to. Nonsense. I cut her off. I'll meet you for lunch. See you soon. I hung up before she could protest. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Please, I thought. Please let there be an explanation for all this. But as I pulled into the Marriott parking lot, I knew in my gut what I would find. And my world was about to shatter. The Marriott loomed before me, a towering monument to my crumbling trust. I parked across the street, heart pounding. What was I doing here? Part of me wanted to turn around, go home, pretend everything was fine. But I couldn't. I had to know. I watched the entrance, my palms sweaty on the steering wheel. Minutes ticked by, each one an eternity. Then I saw her. Lorraine stepped out of the hotel, but she wasn't alone. A man was with her, tall, dark-haired, his hand on the small of her back. They were laughing about something. My vision blurred. This couldn't be happening. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I snapped a few pictures. The man, Greg, I assumed, leaned in close, whispering something in Lorraine's ear. She giggled, playfully swatting his chest. Ball rose in my throat. How long had this been going on? How many seminars had really been rendezvous with this homewrecker? They climbed into a sleek sports car, I guessed, and drove off. Without thinking, I followed. The drive was a blur. My mind raced, replaying every late night, every weekend away. How could I have been so blind? They pulled into a seedy motel on the outskirts of town. I parked across the street, watching as they got a room key and disappeared inside. For a long moment, I sat there, numb. Part of me wanted to storm in there, confront them both. But what would that accomplish? No, I needed to be smart about this. I took more pictures of their car in the lot, the motel sign, the room number, evidence. For the divorce lawyers. For custody. God, the kids. How was I going to tell them? Hours passed. I alternated between rage and despair. How could she do this to us? To our family? Finally, as the sun began to set, they emerged. Lorraine's hair was mussed, her clothes wrinkled. They shared a passionate kiss before parting ways. I immediately took their photo. I waited until Greg's car was out of sight before starting my own engine. I knew I should go home, face Lorraine, but I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I found myself pulling into Max's driveway. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and ushered me inside. It's true, I choked out. You were right. Max's expression was a mix of sympathy and anger. Ah, hell. I'm so sorry, man. He poured us both a stiff drink. What are you going to do? I stared into the amber liquid. I don't know. Divorce, I guess. But the kids? Max clasped my shoulder. We'll figure it out. You're not alone in this. We talked late into the night. Max suggested counseling, trying to work things out. But my mind was made up. There was no coming back from this betrayal. It was past midnight when I finally made my way home. The house was dark, quiet. I stood in the driveway, staring at the facade of our perfect life. Inside, Lorraine was asleep on the couch. She stirred as I entered, blinking groggily. Evan, where have you been? I was worried. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd loved, trusted, built a life with. And now, we need to talk, I said, my voice cold. Lorraine sat up, suddenly alert. What's wrong? I pulled out my phone, showing her the photos. Her face drained of color. Evan, I was just... Don't. My voice was sharp. Don't you dare say anything. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything, I swear. I laughed bitterly. Didn't mean anything? You threw away our marriage, our family, for something that didn't mean anything? She reached for me, but I stepped back. Please, Evan. We can work this out. Go to counseling. I'll do anything. I shook my head. It's too late for that. I want a divorce. Lorraine broke down, sobbing. No, please. Think of the children. I am thinking of the children, I said quietly. They deserve better than this. Better than you. I turned away, heading for the stairs. I'm sleeping in the guest room. We'll talk about logistics in the morning. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed, I stared at the ceiling. My life had irrevocably changed. But as the initial shock wore off, a new emotion began to take hold. Rage. Lorraine had destroyed everything we'd built. And for what? A cheap fling? No, I wouldn't let her get away with this. She'd torn apart our family, betrayed my trust, and for what? A few stolen moments with some smooth-talking doctor? I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The kids. What would I tell them? How could I protect them from this mess? One thing was clear. I couldn't let Lorraine win. She didn't get to blow up our lives and walk away unscathed. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, I made a decision. I'd fight. For my kids, for my dignity, for everything we built together. I got up, my body aching from the restless night. Quietly, I packed a bag with some clothes and essentials. I couldn't stay here, not with her. In the kitchen, I found Lorraine already up, her eyes red and puffy. Evan, she started, her voice trembling. Please, can we talk about this? I held up a hand, silencing her. Save it, Lorraine. I'm going to stay with Max for a while. Her face crumpled. What about the kids? I'll be back to take them to school. We'll figure out a schedule. You can't just leave, she pleaded. What will we tell them? I turned to her, my voice cold. We'll tell them the truth. That mommy decided to throw away her family for a role in the hay with Dr. Charming. Lorraine flinched as if I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I demanded. Please enlighten me. How exactly does one accidentally fall into an affair? She opened her mouth, then closed it again, tears streaming down her face. I shook my head, disgusted. That's what I thought. I'll be back for the kids. As I walked out the door, Lorraine called after me. Evan, please. I love you. I paused, not turning around. You should have thought of that before. The drive to Max's was a blur. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and wordlessly ushered me inside. We sat at his kitchen table, nursing cups of coffee. What's the plan? Max asked finally. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I don't know. Divorce, I guess. But the kids? Max nodded sympathetically. It's gonna be rough, but you'll get through this. And hey, I'm here for you, whatever you need. I managed a weak smile. Thanks, man. I don't know what I'd do without you. As I sipped my coffee, a quiet rage began to build inside me. Lorraine thought she could just apologize and everything would be fine. No, she'd made her choice. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts. It was time to call in some help. Time to show Lorraine exactly what she'd thrown away. The lawyer's office was cold, impersonal. I sat across from Mr. Daniels, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses, as he explained Ohio's divorce laws. Unfortunately, Mr. Callahan, Ohio is a no-fault divorce state, he said, his voice monotone. This means that regardless of your wife's infidelity, the court will still aim for an equitable distribution of assets. I leaned forward, my hands clenched. But she cheated. Doesn't that count for anything? Daniel sighed, removing his glasses. Morally, yes. Legally, not as much as you'd hope. Given her stable job and role as primary caregiver, she could potentially even gain primary custody of the children. My stomach dropped. You're telling me she could cheat, blow up our family, and still walk away with everything? Not everything, Daniels clarified. But yes, she could come out of this quite well, financially speaking. I stood up, pacing the small office. This is insane. There has to be something we can do. Daniel spread his hands. We can fight, of course, but I want you to be prepared for a potentially long and costly battle. I ran a hand through my hair, frustration building. And the kids? How do I protect them? We can push for joint custody, Daniels replied. But unless we can prove Lorraine is an unfit mother, it's unlikely you'd get sole custody. I sank back into my chair, deflated. So what you're saying is, the system is stacked against me. Daniels nodded sympathetically. I'm afraid so, Mr. Callahan. I'm sorry. As I left the office, my mind was reeling. How could this be happening? Lorraine betrays me, and she gets rewarded? I found myself driving to Max's shop, needing to talk to someone who'd understand. Max looked up as I entered, wiping his hands on a rag. Hey man, how'd it go with the lawyer? I shook my head, leaning against a workbench. Not good. Turns out the law doesn't care much about cheating wives. Max's face darkened. Seriously? That's messed up. Tell me about it, I sighed. The lawyer says Lorraine could end up with half of everything, maybe even primary custody of the kids. Max whistled low. Damn. So what are you gonna do? I shrugged, feeling helpless. I don't know, man. Fight it, I guess. But it's gonna be ugly. Max was quiet for a moment, then spoke hesitantly. Have you thought about, I don't know, counseling or something? Maybe try to work it out? I stared at him, incredulous. Work it out? She cheated on me, Max. How do you come back from that? He held up his hands defensively. I'm just saying, for the kids' sake. The kids deserve better than a lying, cheating mother. I snapped. Max nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry, man. I shouldn't have suggested it. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have snapped at you. I don't know what to do. Max clasped my shoulder. We'll figure it out, okay? You're not alone in this. As I drove home that night, my mind was churning. The law wouldn't help me. Reconciliation was out of the question. There had to be another way. I pulled into the driveway, steeling myself for another confrontation with Lorraine. As I entered the house, I heard her voice from the kitchen. Evan, is that you? I found her at the table, surrounded by papers. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. Where were you? She asked. I've been trying to call. I ignored her question. What's all this? She gestured at the papers. I've been looking at apartments. I thought, maybe it would be better if I moved out for a while. I laughed bitterly. Oh, now you want to leave? Little late for that, isn't it? Lorraine flinched. Evan, please. I know I messed up, but can't we at least try to be civil? For the kids. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. Civil? You want me to be civil after what you did? She stood up, her voice pleading. I made a mistake. A terrible, horrible mistake. But our marriage, our family, it has to be worth fighting for. I shook my head, my voice cold. You should have thought of that before you jumped into bed with Greg. Lorraine's face crumpled. It wasn't like that. It just happened. Things don't just happen, Lorraine. I spat. You made a choice. And now we all have to live with it. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't. Just don't. As I turned to leave, Lorraine called out, her voice breaking. What about the kids? What are we going to tell them? I paused, not looking back. We'll tell them the truth. That sometimes, people make choices that hurt the ones they love. I headed upstairs, my resolve hardening with each step. Lorraine had made her choice. Now it was time to make mine. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I knew one thing for certain. Traditional justice wouldn't cut it. If I wanted to protect my kids, my future, I'd have to take matters into my own hands. I reached for my phone, scrolling through my contacts. My finger hovered over a name I hadn't called in years. Derek. My brother had always had my back, even when we drifted apart. If anyone could help me now, it was him. I hit call, my heart pounding as the phone rang. Hello? Derek's gruff voice answered. I took a deep breath. Hey, big brother. It's Evan. I need your help. The diner was nearly empty, just a few truckers nursing cups of coffee at the counter. I sat in a booth near the back, nervously tapping my fingers on the tabletop. The bell above the door jingled, and I looked up to see Derek walk in. He's scanning the room, his military training evident in his posture. I stood up, suddenly unsure. It had been years since we'd seen each other. Derek. He turned, his eyes finding mine. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he closed the distance in a few long strides and pulled me into a bone-crushing hug. "Little brother," he said gruffly, "it's good to see you." We sat down, an awkward silence falling between us. The waitress came over, pouring us both coffee. "So," Derek said finally, "want to tell me what's going on?" I took a deep breath, then spilled everything. Lorraine's affair, the impending divorce, the unfair loss. Derek listened silently, his face darkening with each word. When I finished, he leaned back, crossing his arms. "Jesus, Evan. I'm so sorry." I shrugged, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, well, it is what it is." Derek's eyes narrowed. "No, it's not. You called me for a reason. What do you need?" I hesitated, then met his gaze. "I need information. On the guy she cheated with. Greg Turner." Derek nodded slowly. "What kind of information?" "Anything," I said. "Dirt. Leverage. Something I can use to make sure I don't lose my kids." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "You sure about this, Evan? Once we start down this road?" "I'm sure," I said firmly. Lorraine made her choice. Now I'm making mine. Derek nodded, a hint of a smile on his face. "All right then, let's get to work." Over the next few weeks, Derek and I dug deep into Greg Turner's life. We called in favors, followed leads, pieced together a picture of the man who'd helped destroy my marriage. "Got something?" Derek said one night, his voice excited over the phone. "Greg's got a history of misconduct at the hospital. Drug use, harassment, the works. It's all been hushed up, but the records are there if you know where to look." I felt a surge of hope. "Can you get proof?" "Already working on it," Derek replied. "Give me a few more days." As we worked, I felt closer to my brother than I had in years. One night, as we pored over documents in my temporary apartment, I looked up at him. "Hey, Derek." He glanced up from his laptop. "Yeah. Thanks," I said softly, "for doing this, for having my back." Derek's face softened. "Always, little brother. Always." Finally, after weeks of work, we had what we needed. A thick file of evidence detailing Greg's misdeeds. I stared at the documents spread across my kitchen table, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. "You okay?" Derek asked, concern in his voice. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's just, this is it, isn't it? No going back after this." Derek placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to do this, Evan. We can find another way." I shook my head, steeling my resolve. "No, Lorraine and Greg need to face consequences. For the kids' sake, if nothing else." Derek nodded, understanding in his eyes. "All right then, what's the next move?" I gathered up the documents, my mind already forming a plan. Now, we set the trap. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. With Derek's help, I carefully planted evidence of Greg's drug use and harassment in strategic locations around the hospital. An empty pill bottle here, a compromising email there. All the while, I maintained a facade of normalcy at home. Lorraine and I danced around each other, our conversations stilted and formal. One night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at me with big, worried eyes. "Daddy, are you and Mommy getting a divorce?" My heart clenched. I sat on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair. "Why do you ask that, sweetie?" She sniffled. "Because you're always fighting, and you sleep in different rooms now." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Honey, sometimes grown-ups have problems they need to work out. But I want you to know that no matter what happens between me and Mommy, we both love you and Jake very, very much." Lily threw her arms around me, burying her face in my chest. "I don't want you to go away." I held her tight, fighting back tears. "I'm not going anywhere, baby. I promise." As I left Lily's room, I ran into Lorraine in the hallway. She looked tired, defeated. How is she? Lorraine asked softly. I sighed. Scared. Confused. She knows something's wrong? Lorraine's eyes filled with tears. God, Evan, what are we doing to them? For a moment, I felt a pang of doubt. Was I doing the right thing? Then I remembered the motel, Greg's hands on my wife, and my resolve hardened. We're not doing anything, I said coldly. This is all on you. Lorraine flinched as if I'd slapped her. Without another word, I brushed past her and headed to the guest room. The next day, I met Derek at a coffee shop to go over the final stages of our plan. You sure about this? Derek asked, his voice low. Once we pull the trigger, there's no going back. I nodded, my jaw set. I'm sure. They need to face consequences. Derek leaned back, studying me. And what about you? Have you thought about what this might do to you? To the kids? I hesitated, then shook my head. I can't think about that now. I have to protect my family. Derek sighed. All right, but promise me something? What? When this is all over, get some help. Talk to someone. Don't let this eat you up inside. I managed a weak smile. I promise. That night, I sat at my computer, my finger hovering over the send button. The email would go to the hospital administration, anonymously tipping them off about Greg's misconduct. I thought about Lily's tearful face, Jake's confusion, Lorraine's betrayal. With a deep breath, I clicked send. The trap was set. Now all that was left was to watch it spring. Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on Lorraine. She seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone with a worried expression. Finally, one evening, she came home looking shell-shocked. Evan, she called out, her voice shaky. Are you here? I came down the stairs, keeping my face neutral. What's wrong? Lorraine sank onto the couch, her face pale. It's Greg. He's been suspended from the hospital. There's an investigation, drug use, harassment. They're saying he might lose his medical license. I feigned surprise. What? That's terrible. Are you okay? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and fear. I don't know. I just can't believe it. Greg always seemed so together. I sat down next to her, careful to maintain some distance. People aren't always what they seem, I guess. Lorraine nodded slowly, then turned to me with pleading eyes. Evan, I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I want to make things right. Can we please talk about our future? I stood up, keeping my distance. What future, Lorraine? You threw that away when you decided to cheat. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Please, Evan. I love you. I love our family. We can work through this. I shook my head, my voice cold. No, we can't. It's too late for that. Lorraine's face crumpled. What about the kids? They need both of us. They need parents they can trust, I retorted. You should have thought about that before you started sneaking around with Greg. She flinched at his name. It was a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake. I'll do anything to make it right. I laughed bitterly. Anything? How about turning back time? How about undoing the betrayal? Lorraine sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I'm so sorry, Evan. I never meant to hurt you like this. I turned away, unable to watch her cry. I'm going out. Don't wait up. As I left the house, I pulled out my phone and dialed Derek's number. Hey, little brother, he answered. How's it going? Phase 1 is complete, I said, my voice low. Greg's been suspended. Now we move on to Lorraine. Derek was silent for a moment. You sure about this, Evan? It's not too late to back out. I gripped the phone tighter. I'm sure. She made her choice. Now she has to live with the consequences. All right, Derek sighed. What's the next move? I got into my car, starting the engine. We need to hire a nanny. Someone to watch the kids while I gather evidence against Lorraine. I might know someone, Derek said. I'll make some calls. As I drove through the darkening streets, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt. Was I going too far? Then I remembered Lorraine's betrayal, the look on Lily's face when she asked about divorce, and my resolve hardened. No, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about protecting my children, securing our future. And I'd do whatever it took to make that happen. The next morning, I met with Sarah. the nanny Derek had recommended. She was young, cheerful, and came with glowing references. "So, Mr. Callahan," Sarah said, her smile bright, "tell me about your children." I leaned back in my chair, forcing a smile. "Jake's 12, into baseball and video games. Lily's 8, loves ballet. They're good kids, just going through a tough time right now." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "Divorce is hard on everyone, but I'm here to help make things easier." I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "It's more complicated than that. Their mother, she's not always reliable. I need someone who can be there consistently, someone the kids can count on." Sarah's expression turned serious. "I understand, Mr. Callahan. You can count on me." As Sarah settled into our routine, I began my next phase. I set up cameras around the house, documenting Lorraine's comings and goings. I noted every time she was late picking up the kids, every dinner she missed, every school event she forgot. One evening, as I reviewed the footage, Derek called. "How's it going?" he asked. I sighed, rubbing my eyes. "Slowly, but I'm building a case. Lorraine's been distracted, erratic, missing important events for the kids." Derek was quiet for a moment. "Evan, are you sure this is what you want? It's not too late to try counseling, to work things out." I felt a flash of anger. Work things out? After what she did? No, Derek. She made her choice. Now she has to live with it. All right, Derek said, his voice placating. "Just be careful, okay? Don't let this consume you." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, staring at the screens. On one, I could see Lorraine in the kitchen, her head in her hands. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Then I remembered the motel, Greg's arms around her, and my heart hardened once more. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, presenting the evidence I'd gathered against Lorraine after I discovered her affair. Mr. Daniels whistled as he flipped through the file. "This is comprehensive, Mr. Callahan. Documented neglect, erratic behavior. Combined with the affair, we have a strong case for full custody." I leaned forward. "And the assets?" Daniels nodded. "Given the circumstances, we can argue for a more favorable distribution. It won't be easy, but with this evidence, we have a fighting chance." As I left the office, I felt a mixture of triumph and unease. Was I going too far? Then I remembered Lorraine's betrayal, the pain in my children's eyes, and my resolve hardened. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Lorraine fought back, accusing me of setting her up, of manipulating the situation. But in the end, the evidence was too overwhelming. The judge looked stern as he delivered his verdict. "In light of the evidence presented, I'm granting Mr. Callahan full custody of the minor children, with Mrs. Callahan allowed supervised visitation." Lorraine gasped, her face pale. "No, please. You can't take my children." The judge continued, unmoved. "Furthermore, given Mrs. Callahan's infidelity and neglect, the court orders an uneven distribution of assets in Mr. Callahan's favor." As we left the courtroom, Lorraine grabbed my arm. "How could you do this to me? To our family?" I pulled away, my voice cold. "I didn't do this, Lorraine. You did. When you decided to cheat." Her face crumpled. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But they're my children too." "You should have thought of that before," I said, walking away. That night, as I tucked the kids into bed, Lily looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Daddy, why can't Mommy live with us anymore?" My heart clenched. I sat on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair. "Sometimes, sweetheart, grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love. Mommy made some bad choices, and now we all have to deal with the consequences." Lily sniffled. "But I miss her." I pulled her close, fighting back my own tears. "I know, baby. I know." As I left Lily's room, I found Jake waiting in the hallway. "Dad," he said, his voice small, "is this my fault? Did Mom leave because of me?" I knelt down, looking him in the eye. "No, Jake. Absolutely not. This is not your fault, or Lily's. This is about choices your mom made. Adult choices that have nothing to do with you kids." Jake nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. As I hugged him goodnight, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Was I doing the right thing? Or was I letting my anger and hurt destroy my family? But it was too late for doubts now. The wheels were in motion, and there was no going back. I had one last plan in mind, to destroy Greg. The cafe was quiet, just a few patrons nursing their afternoon coffees. I sat in a corner booth, my hands wrapped around a mug, waiting. The bell over the door jingled, and a woman walked in. She was attractive, well-dressed, with a nervous energy about her. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on me. I stood as she approached. "Christina? I'm Evan Callahan." She nodded, sliding into the booth across from me. "Thank you for meeting me. I'm still not sure why I'm here." I took a deep breath. "I have some information about your husband, Greg. Information I think you need to hear." Christina's face tightened. "What kind of information?" "Before I tell you," I said carefully, "I want you to know that I'm not doing this out of malice. But I believe you deserve the truth." She leaned forward, her voice low. "Just tell me, Mr. Callahan." I pulled out a file, sliding it across the table. "Greg has been having an affair with my wife, Lorraine." Christina's face went pale. She opened the file with shaking hands, gasping as she saw the photos inside. "No," she whispered. "This can't be true." I reached out, touching her hand gently. "I'm sorry, Christina. I wish it wasn't." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "How long have you known?" "A few months," I admitted. "I've been gathering evidence, not just of the affair, but of Greg's other activities." Christina's eyes widened. "So you were behind getting Greg fired. What VE you got?" I hesitated, then pushed on. "Drug use, harassment at the hospital. It's all in there." She flipped through the file, her face a mixture of shock and disgust. "Oh God, I had no idea. How could I not have known before?" I shook my head. "Don't blame yourself. Greg was very good at hiding things." Christina closed the file, her jaw set. "What are you going to do?" "I've already done it," I said quietly. "The hospital knows. Greg's been fired, as you know. My divorce from Lorraine is almost final." She nodded slowly. "And now you're telling me." "You deserve to know the truth," I said. "What you do with it is up to you." Christina stood abruptly. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan. I need some time to process this." As she left, I felt a twinge of guilt. Was I doing the right thing? Then I remembered Lorraine's betrayal, the pain in my children's eyes, and my resolve hardened once more. A week later, I received a call from Christina. "I've filed for divorce," she said, her voice steady. "And I've gotten a restraining order against Greg." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "How are you doing?" There was a pause. "I'm angry, hurt, but relieved, in a way. At least now I know the truth." After we hung up, I sat in silence, contemplating the wreckage of our lives. Greg and Lorraine had destroyed two families with their selfishness, and now they were facing the consequences. That evening, as I was making dinner for the kids, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Lorraine standing there, looking haggard. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She walked into the living room, wringing her hands. "I lost my job," she blurted out. "The hospital. They said my association with Greg was too much of a liability." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I'm sorry to hear that." Lorraine laughed bitterly. "Are you? Isn't this what you wanted? To destroy me completely?" I shook my head. "I didn't want any of this, Lorraine. You made your choices. These are the consequences." She sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. "What am I going to do? I've lost everything. My job, my home, my children." For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Then I remembered her betrayal, and my heart hardened. "You should have thought of that before you decided to cheat," I said coldly. Lorraine looked up at me, her eyes red. "I know I messed up, Evan, but did I really deserve all this?" I met her gaze steadily. "You and Greg destroyed two families with your selfishness. What did you think would happen?" She gasped. "Two families? What are you talking about?" "Christina knows," I said simply. "She's divorcing Greg. Got a restraining order against him." Lorraine's face crumpled. "Oh God, what have we done?" I turned away, unable to watch her cry. You made your bed, Lorraine. Now you have to lie in it. As she left, sobbing, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt. The revenge I'd sought was complete, but at what cost? Months passed. Slowly, life settled into a new routine. The kids adjusted to life without Lorraine, though there were still tough moments. One Saturday morning, as I was making pancakes, Jake wandered into the kitchen. "Hey, Dad," he said hesitantly. "Can I ask you something?" I flipped a pancake, trying to keep my voice casual. "Sure, buddy. What's up?" Jake fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. Do you think Mom will ever come back? Like, to live with us?" I set down the spatula, turning to face him. "Jake, come here." He approached, and I knelt down to his level. "Your mom loves you very much. But sometimes, when grown-ups make certain choices, it changes things in ways that can't be undone. Your mom and I can't live together anymore, but that doesn't change how much we both love you and Lily." Jake nodded, his eyes welling up. "I miss her sometimes." I pulled him into a hug. "I know, buddy. It's okay to miss her. And you'll still see her, just differently now." As Jake helped me finish the pancakes, I felt a mixture of love and guilt. Had I done the right thing? Or had my quest for revenge hurt my children in ways I hadn't anticipated? Later that day, Derek came over to help me with some yard work. As we raked leaves, he eyed me carefully. "How you holding up, little brother?" he asked. I shrugged. "Okay, I guess. The kids are adjusting. It's not easy, but we're getting there." Derek leaned on his rake. "And you? How are you really doing?" I paused, considering. Honestly, I'm not sure. Part of me feels satisfied, I guess. Lorraine and Greg faced consequences for what they did, but another part feels guilty. Derek finished. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I wonder if I went too far. If I let my anger cloud my judgment." Derek put a hand on my shoulder. "You did what you thought was right to protect your kids, but maybe it's time to let go of that anger. For your sake and theirs." I looked over at Jake and Lily, playing in a pile of leaves. "You're right. It's time to focus on moving forward." Over the next few weeks, I made a conscious effort to rebuild. I reached out to old friends, started going to the gym again. I even agreed to have coffee with a coworker who'd been hinting at interest for months. One evening, as I was helping Lily with her homework, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lorraine. "Can we talk?" "About the kids. Please." I hesitated, then replied. "Okay. Coffee shop on Main, tomorrow at 2. The next day, I arrived at the cafe to find Lorraine already there. She looked tired, but more put together than the last time I'd seen her. "Thanks for meeting me," she said as I sat down. I nodded. "What did you want to talk about?" Lorraine took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. And therapy. I know I messed up, Evan, badly, but I want to try to make things right with the kids." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. "How?" "I've got a new job," she said. "It's not much, but it's steady. I found a small apartment nearby. I want to be more present in their lives, if you'll let me." Part of me wanted to refuse, to keep her away from the children she'd hurt. But I thought of Jake asking if his mom would come back, of Lily's tears at bedtime. "Okay," I said finally. "We can try. But it's going to be on my terms, and the kids' needs come first." Lorraine's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Evan. I promise I won't let you down again." As I left the cafe, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The anger that had driven me for so long was beginning to fade, replaced by a cautious hope for the future. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, carefully, we established a new normal. Lorraine had supervised visits with the kids, gradually earning back their trust. I started dating again, taking it slow and always putting the children first. Derek became a constant presence in our lives, the uncle the kids adored and the brother I'd missed for so long. One sunny afternoon, as we watched Jake's baseball game, Derek turned to me. "You know, little brother, I'm proud of you." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" He gestured to the field, where Jake was up to bat. "For this. For coming out the other side. For putting your kids first." I watched as Jake hit a solid double. His face lit up with joy. Lily cheered from the stands, her ballet tutu peeking out from under her brother's team jacket. I couldn't have done it without you, I said quietly. Derek grinned, punching my arm lightly. That's what big brothers are for. As we cheered Jake's run home, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The past year had been a whirlwind of pain, anger, and revenge. But standing here, watching my son play ball, my daughter twirling in the stands, I knew we'd be okay. Life wasn't perfect. There were still tough days, moments when the pain of betrayal flared up, but I was learning to let go, to focus on the future rather than the past. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes. "Daddy, are you happy?" I paused, considering her question carefully. "You know what, sweetheart? I think I am." Lily smiled, snuggling into her pillow. "Good, 'cause I'm happy too." As I closed her door, I felt a warmth in my chest. We'd been through hell, but we'd come out the other side, stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. I walked downstairs, where Derek was sprawled on the couch, flipping through channels. "Hey," he said, looking up. "Kids asleep?" I nodded, sinking into the armchair. "Yeah, finally." Derek muted the TV, studying my face. "You okay?" I thought about Lily's question, about the long road we'd traveled. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I think I am." Derek grinned. "Good. Because I was thinking, maybe it's time you got back out there. I know this great woman at the gym." I threw a pillow at him, laughing. "One step at a time, big brother. One step at a time." As we settled in to watch the game, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to it. Lorraine and Greg had faced the consequences of their actions. Justice, in its own way, had been served. But more importantly, I'd found my way back to what really mattered. My children, my family, and the possibility of happiness again. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a good one. And that, I realized, was enough. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.